When humanity entered its darkest hour and the Horus Heresy broke out, many great champions fell from the light of the Emperor. Some, however, stood loyal, despite the betrayal of all around them. Many of those from the traitor legions who refused to abandon the Imperium were slain, but a small number not only escaped, but went on to establish their own legends. Today, we look at one such hero, the warrior responsible for delivering word of the heresy to Terra before serving as a forerunner to both the Inquisition and the Grey Knights. This is the tale of Nathaniel Garro, battle captain of the Death Guard's 7th Great Company and the first Knight Errant. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. Nathaniel Garro was born on Terra, in a region near to the current-day country of Albania. When the Legiones Astartes were founded by the Emperor, Garro signed up to join the 14th Legion, known at the time as the Dusk Raiders for their nighttime attack strategies. Whilst the Legion were entirely of Terran gene stock at the time, once Mortarion was found on the toxic world of Barbaros, all new recruits were drawn from there into the newly renamed Death Guard. This meant that the number of Terrans in the Legion began to dwindle as they were replaced with warriors of Barbaros when they fell, and Garro reportedly feared that the fall of the last Terran would see the old Dusk Raider traditions finally be erased. The differing homeworlds and thus differing traditions also caused some rifts and divisions between the two groups of Astartes, and Garro was mockingly nicknamed Straight Arrow Garro by the Barbarous contingent for his refusal to abandon the old traditions and his reserved, staunch nature. By the time of the Istvan III atrocity, Garro was one of the few Terrans left within the 14th Legion. It is also worth noting that the warriors of Barbaros were generally the ones who followed Horus and Mortarion in betraying the Emperor, whilst those from Terra, and thus more closely bonded with the Primarch's gene-father, generally stood loyal. During the Great Crusade, Garro had fought alongside a variety of legions. He had formed a close bond with Captain Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children, one of the few non-Death Guard who Garro would refer to as brother, and he also knew Garviel Loken of the Lunar Wolves / Sons of Horus. Perhaps these individuals had some bearing on Garro's choice to stay loyal, but any effect would solely be from Tarvitz and still likely negligible. Following a campaign known as the Jorgal Persecution, where the Death Guard fought alongside the Psychic Blanks in the Sisters of Silence, Garro was invited by Mortarion to partake in a ritual the Primarch had introduced into the Death Guard. He had been recommended by a Sister of Silence who would come to be very important later. Whenever Mortarion fought in battle, at the end of the fight he invited a single warrior to drink with him, although the drink was a lethal concoction of toxins known and unknown as opposed to standard Imperial beverages. Though the smell was repulsive, to refuse the drink was seen as weakness, as the Death Guard was said to be capable of surviving any poison, and thus drinking from the Primarch's cups would show that strength. Garro disapproved of the practice, but Mortarion explained his reasoning, and so Garro drank. The Death Lord then subtly questioned Garro regarding his refusal to join the warrior lodges now embedded within the Death Guard thanks to Horus, and his stance in the event of a rebellion against the Emperor. To Mortarion's disappointment, the battle captain explained that the lodges were built on secrecy, and that only the Emperor could guide the Legiones Astartes and the Imperium to glory. Despite this setback, Mortarion appointed Garro as his equerry, before inviting him to join the Primarch on Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, in order to discuss the upcoming Istvan campaign. During the compliance actions in the Istvan system, Battle Captain Garro and his great company fought alongside the first company of the Emperor's Children on Istvan Extremis, the final and furthest flung world in the system. Their opponents were in the thrall of the Chaos Gods, particularly Slanesh, and Garro was gravely injured by one of their psykers known as a Warsinger, suffering crush injuries and losing his lower right leg. With his own apothecary far away in the battle, the wound would have proved fatal for Garro, but he was saved by Chief Apothecary Fabius of the 3rd Legion. Once back with the fleet, Garro had a bionic leg implanted to replace the lost one, which proved to be extremely infuriating for him as he was forced to walk with a limp until he had mastered the new limb, or it had learned of his movement style, whichever you prefer. This left Garro away from the front lines when Horus revealed the heresy on Istvan III, as well as the entire 7th Great Company, as their commander was out of commission. Garro was assigned, along with the 2nd Captain Ignatius Grulgor, to the frigate the Eisenstein by 1st Captain Callus Typhon with their respective command squads, whilst their companies were to be used as reserves by the War Master. Before they left, Typhon pulled Grulgor aside. He explained to the 2nd Captain that if Garro did not turn to the War Master's cause as Mortarion hoped, then Grulgor had to eliminate him, an order that Grulgor relished, as he despised Garro's uppity Terran nature. During the Istvan III action, Grulgor ordered the Eisenstein to drop into low orbit, an order that Garro found very strange, as the frigate wasn't carrying additional reserve Astartes. Garro's human housecarl, Caleb Arryn, was sent down to the launch bay to see what cargo was on board and to spy on the 2nd Captain. What he saw were vials of green liquid being placed into the missiles in place of the traditional explosive charges that thruster-guided bombs usually carried. Arryn was almost captured by Grulgor and his men, but was saved by the 7th Company's apothecary Merrick Voyen, who had travelled separately to the launch bay as part of his own investigations. Voyen listened to Arryn's report and realised what was going on. The vials contained the Life Eater virus, used only in the most extreme cases against the foulest of Xenos, but never on other humans. The Eisenstein wasn't even permitted to carry virus bombs, as only the mighty capital ships could use them. Grulgor had brought the vials from the Death Guard's own capital vessel, the Endurance. At the same time as the housecarl and the apothecary discovered the virus bombs, Garro was confronted with the revelations of Horus's betrayal as the Emperor's children vessel named the Andronicus hailed them. The ship belonged to Lord Commander Eidolon, and instructed the Eisenstein to fire on a Thunderhawk that had left the Andronicus's launch bays and was being pursued by other 3rd Legion fighters. However, the Thunderhawk sent a message to Garro too, the pilot revealing himself as Captain Tarvitz. Tarvitz told his honour brother of what was to happen on Istvan III. Horus had turned from the Emperor and would bombard the planet with virus bombs, killing every Astartes who was planetside. Despite the shocking allegation given by Tarvitz, Garro believed him without a doubt. Whilst he told the gunners to take out Tarvitz's ship, he changed the coordinates slightly so as the pursuit crafts would be destroyed instead, and the resulting sensor disruption would allow Tarvitz to escape. He chose to go down to the planet to warn the other Astartes, and is confirmed to have defeated Lucius the Eternal in single combat whilst there. His crew was shocked, but Garro explained that he believed Tarvitz's word and that the captain would not lie. It then began to sink in. If Horus had turned traitor, then Fulgrim, Angron, and most horrifyingly of all, Mortarion had fallen too. It was at this time that Arryn and Voyen returned to inform Garro of the virus bombs in the launch bay, confirming Tarvitz's story. With only a couple of warriors available, Garro went down to confront Grulgor and his command in order to stop the virus bombs from launching. When confronted by Garro, Grulgor decreed that the Emperor had abandoned the Legiones Astartes and left weak humans in command of the Imperium, which he sort of had, to be honest, at least when you look at it from the poorly informed Astartes viewpoint that all of them had. Grulgor said that the Death Guard were at Mortarion's and Horus's command, but not the Emperor's. In response, Garro, Voyen, Arryn, and another Astartes called Sendek launched themselves at their traitorous brothers. Arryn saved Garro from being shot by Grulgor by shooting his stub gun directly at the 2nd Captain's bolt pistol to knock off his aim. He succeeded, but the Astartes reflexes of Grulgor saw the housecarl impaled by a thrown combat knife. The now wayward bolt round struck one of the loaded Life Eater canisters, spilling its lethal contents into the launch bay. With his dying act, Arryn dove for the bulkhead controls and sealed the bay. Garro rolled underneath the closing door, I like to think Indiana Jones style, now safe with Doyen and Sendek from the virus behind it. But Grulgor and all of his men were trapped inside with Arryn and died in screaming agony. With the traitors dead, Garro and co returned to explain what had transpired to the rest of the crew, as well as detail Horus's actions and the massacre about to unfold on the planet below. Garro knew full well that he would have been on Istvan III had he not been previously injured, and so planned to turn the cruel hand of fate to his advantage, bringing word of the heresy to the Emperor. Thus began the flight of the Eisenstein. Whilst it was possible to warn the other Loyalist Astartes of the impending betrayal, potentially saving some of them, Garro knew that he could not do so. If he broadcast to the fleet and to the planet, then Horus and Mortarion would have become aware of his plan and destroyed the Eisenstein, as the frigate was vastly outgunned, and with its death the news of the heresy would never make it to Terra. As a result, Garro had to abandon his brothers in order to flee. The Eisenstein was then hailed by another Thunderhawk, this one belonging to Iacton Cruz of the Sons of Horus, who had decided he would play no further part in Horus's actions and had brought individuals with him, including the living saint and former remembrancer Euphrati Keeler. Once everyone was aboard, Garro hailed the main fleet to inform them the frigate was leaving low orbit, explaining they had had an engine fault. This was standard procedure, but Garro knew the lie would be exposed as soon as the main engines fired and their flight began. Unfortunately, First Captain Typhon had grown suspicious of the usually brash Grorgor's extended silence, and so he moved to intercept the Eisenstein and fire upon it in his massive flagship, the Terminus Est. Somehow, the frigate survived the assault, albeit taking heavy damage in the process, and was able to slip away into the warp. Admittedly, their astropaths were dead and their navigator was not far behind, so a blind jump was necessary, and no one knew where they would end up. Further compounding matters was the damage suffered by the ship's Gellerfield, allowing Nurgle to infect the Eisenstein and resurrect Grorgor and his men. They were the first of the Plague Marines, and they attacked immediately, finishing off the navigator and infecting the Loyalist with Nurgle's rot. They may well have killed Garro too, but the captain ordered them to make an emergency drop out of the warp, cutting off the Plague Marines from Nurgle and leaving them vulnerable. They died to a man, but their souls were taken by Nurgle, and Grorgor would later be resurrected as a demon prince. With the ship now lost in uninhabited space, it still looked dire for Garro and his crew, and so Garro ordered the warp drive be ejected in a hope that the explosion of the drive would draw attention from any nearby Imperials. As it so happened, they managed to attract the Imperial Fist flagship, the Phalanx, and the Primarch Rogel Dawn, who was bound for Terra also on the Emperor's command. With the testimonies of Cruz, Keeler, and Garro, Dawn was convinced of Horus's betrayal, and so brought the crew of the Eisenstein with him to the Sol System. Upon their arrival in the Sol System, Dawn and the Imperial Fist continued on to Terra in order to warn the Emperor. Garro and co, however, were taken to Luna and kept in a fortress guarded by Sisters of Silence, in case Chaos had corrupted them as well and their story was in fact a lie. The Astartes infected with Nurgle's rot was still with them, and eventually he gave himself up to the Plague God. This allowed a greater demon to possess him, and he killed at least 2 Marines during his rampage before being banished by Garro on the moon's airless surface. Not long after, Malcador the Sigillite came to Luna. He had been tasked by the Emperor with bringing together individuals of an inquisitive nature, who would be formed into a group of investigators tasked with rooting out and destroying heresy wherever it arose. Malcador spoke to Garro, Cruz, and a Sister of Silence called Amendora Kendall, who is coincidentally the same sister who recommended Garro to Mortarion, and recruited them into their new organization. In time, 12 individuals were brought before the Emperor, including 8 Astartes. 4 humans would form the Inquisition, and the 8 Marines would go on to found the Grey Knights. But we shall discuss that another time, as Garro was not one of them. Once Garro was recruited, he was tasked with recruiting another 7 Astartes to join him. Not all of these became Grey Knights, but it can be assumed at least some of them did. The first was a Codicia of the Ultramarines Legion called Tylos Rubio, who Garro recruited in the midst of the battle for Calth. Rubio basically had no choice, having been forced to use his psychic abilities in order to save himself and his brothers from an attack by the Word-Bearers. Rubio also gave Garro the moniker of Knights Errant, which the former Death Guard adopted as the name for their group. The second was recruited in a refugee ship from Istvan, the World Eater Mesa Varan. Initially, Garro, Rubio, and a group of Custodes led an investigation into the vessel, but all the custodians were killed along with the Emperor's children who were aboard by a group of White Scars. I don't know why they were there either, with only Garro and his recruits escaping to destroy the ship. One of the others Garro attempted to recruit was another librarian, this time from the Imperial Fists, called Masek. This annoyed Rogel Dawn somewhat, as Masek was imprisoned on the Phalanx at the time, and the Primarch captured the pair before letting Garro leave and warning him/Malcador not to interfere again. The 3rd through 6th recruit are not explicitly named, sadly, but the 7th and final one came from the virus-bombed Istvan III. Varron, Rubio and Garro travelled down and discovered a colony of survivors, supposedly under attack from the Beast. The trio hunted this supposed monster and found it to be an Astartes who had lost his mind, believing himself the last remaining loyalist and going by the name of Cerberus. Cerberus escaped from them, but they soon discovered that the survivors were in fact plague zombies of Nurgle and ended up fighting alongside the last loyalist to destroy them. With the common foe dead, Cerberus attacked the Knights Errant once again, but Garro was somehow able to overcome his amnesia and splintered psyche to remind the warrior of his name and fate. Cerberus was in fact Garviel Loken of the Lunar Wolves, who had survived the virus bombing, being buried under the rubble of the Choral City, and a further orbital bombardment, seemingly the sole survivor of the battle for Istvan III. With his sanity restored, Loken willingly went along with Garro, who returned to Luna with the others, now that his mission was complete. Garro continued to work for Malcador throughout the Horus Heresy, seeking out other individuals who filled Malcador's requirement of inquisitive individuals. It took years, as the massive rebellion was a major obstacle, but eventually Garro succeeded. By the time he returned to the Sigillite again, the siege of Terra by the traitor forces was underway, and Garro was forced to utilize all of his skills to evade the armies of Horus and make it to the surface. Malcador then gathered all of the people Garro and the other knights had recruited before taking the aforementioned 12 to see the Emperor, who set the wheels in motion for the founding of the Inquisition and the Grey Knights. Only one of these individuals is explicitly named, Janus, the first Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights, but it is known that all 8 Astartes were Psykers, and so I assume Tylos Rubio was also among them. Loken and Garro were not present. Loken had been killed during an assassination attempt on Horus, whilst Garro was confirmed as not a Grey Knight by the Black Library team, though that is not to say that Garro had no role to play following this event. Looking at the full list of Knights Errant, we can also infer that some of the other founders of the Grey Knights were Fel Zarost of the Night Lords, Revuel Arvida of the Thousand Sons, and Ison of an unknown legion, who he is stated as hating. It is possible that other knights had a hidden psychic potential not inferred in their ranks in their old legions, but the 4 we have listed were definitely Psykers, and so almost certainly became Grey Knights. Not that we would know, as every Grey Knight initiate has his name changed upon their ascension, and so we could not compare the list of knights to the list of founders anyway. As for Garro himself, his fate is currently unknown. It may be assumed that he took part in the battle for Terra, but he was seemingly not on the Vengeful Spirit, where 5 knights were killed. I assume he continued working with the humans who founded the Inquisition following the battle, and given the secretive nature of the organization that the Inquisition is, it may explain why his actions have never got on record. We shall have to wait, and we shall have to see. So ends the tale of Nathaniel Garro. His story came full circle, from his birth on Terra to his final return there as a Knight Errant. What became of the former Death Guard captain remains a mystery, but whatever his eventual fate was, his role in helping to prepare humanity for life without the Emperor after the heresy was critical. I hope you've enjoyed today's video, looking at the first and greatest Knight Errant. Next time, we're going to keep with the Imperium in the Horus Heresy era. We've done the legend of Garro, and now we'll be looking at his boss, possibly the greatest human to ever live, Malcador the Sigillite. So join me next time for that. Thank you all for watching. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.